Hi, we're going to get started now. I'm Jamie Court. I'm president of Consumer Watchdog, and with me is Carmen Balber, the executive director of Consumer Watchdog, who is going to MC. And we're fortunate to have with us both Tina Minasian and Dr. Jeffrey Nordella. They are going to talk directly to the new ad we're releasing today, On Call, and how it talks to what really can happen in medical care that is the biggest risk for patients, that a doctor is impaired and treats them. And so I'm going to let Carmen take over and talk a little about the ad and introduce Tina and Dr. Nordella. The ad is now available and is starting to play statewide. It's available on on46.org under TV ads, and is also will soon be available at the front page of consumerwatchdog.org with the press release for today's event, and probably any moment now. So, Carmen, take it away.
Hi, my name is Carmen Balber. I'm the executive director of Consumer Watchdog. Thanks for joining us. Today we are releasing the newest on 46 television ad. It'll be running in Los Angeles, in Sacramento, in Monterey, different markets throughout the state beginning today. And it brings a sharp focus to a central issue of Proposition 46, which is the huge problem of substance abuse among physicians in California. Pardon me. Proposition 46 simply requires random drug and alcohol testing of physicians to identify physicians who are practicing while impaired on duty. If a doctor has a positive drug test that shows that he was impaired on duty, Prop 46 requires the medical board to suspend that doctor's license and take patients out of harm's way while that doctor is dealt with, whether it's enforcement, treatment, or other action to ensure that patients are being treated by a doctor with a substance abuse problem. The ad, On Call, highlights this problem, and I'll just tell you one more piece of information about what a serious problem substance abuse is for physicians here in California that Tina Minasian can certainly elaborate on. But I want to just identify the statistics here in California. Our opponents would like to say that drug screening is just all smoke and mirrors. This isn't about drug screening. That won't help protect patient safety. Well, it's appalling that anyone would suggest that a doctor does anything but hold a patient's life in their hands every time they practice medicine. That's why ensuring that doctors are not impaired on duty is so critical. Here in California, the California Medical Board has said 1 to 2% of physicians are The California Medical Board has said 1 to 2% of physicians will have a substance abuse problem every single year. That's about 2,600 doctors a year in California. But the California Medical Board only disciplines, on average, 32 doctors per year for substance abuse. This is a massive, undetected, and untreated problem in California. And that's why Proposition 46 requires random drug testing to identify these dangerous doctors and protect California patients from them. Now I want to introduce the ad. It's called On Call, and as I said, it starts running in markets all over California today. And then I'll bring on Tina and Dr. Nordella to speak to it. If you could play the ad. Thank you. For those of you on the phone, again, you can see the ad since there were obviously not any words in it at consumerwatchdog.org and on46.org, but I will just let you know that it features a doctor drinking at a bar as his pager goes off saying 911, report to ER, and tells voters that Proposition 46 will enact the first law in the nation requiring random drug and alcohol testing and suspension of doctors while they're on duty. Before I introduce Tina, I do just want to read one other item. This week, the oldest scientific magazine in the country, Scientific American, endorsed drug testing of physicians, talking about Proposition 46. And they stated, if we expect our train and truck drivers to be sober when they clock in, we should expect nothing less from those who follow the Hippocratic Credo to, above all, do no harm. And that's what Proposition 46 is about, preventing patients from harm, whether it's from substance abuse or purely negligent doctors, and ensuring that those doctors are held accountable. Let me introduce now Tina Minasian, who flew down from Roseville, the Sacramento area, and has her own horrific story about her Orange County doctor, Dr. Brian West, who had a history of substance abuse that she knew nothing about until it was too late. Tina?
Again, my name is Tina Minasian. I'm from the Sacramento area. Proposition 46 really hits home with me. In December of 2002, I had a surgery done, and it turns out I wasn't even a candidate for the surgery that I had. I find out 3 months later that my doctor closed his office and abandoned me. A year later, I find out that he was a drunk. He'd been arrested multiple times on DUI arrests. I also found out that he was in a secret, now defunct program from the medical board called Diversion. And I was very, very, very upset, because when I looked this doctor up, there was nothing on the website, medical board's website, that showed that he had an alcohol problem or even an arrest record. When I found that out, I went to my first medical board meeting, and I have to tell you, I was appalled by the CMA upholding the diversion program. And in 20 years, it was the first time that the medical board had ever learned of a patient being injured by a doctor in their diversion program. Doctors are allowed to continue to practice medicine even if they have a substance abuse problem, as long as they're in the diversion program. Well, guess what? This doctor was in a diversion program, and he hurt me and countless others. One, he hurt a friend of mine, Becky Anderson, who's now passed away. He was on his way to treat Becky. He just came from a party in Granite Bay, had many drinks. I was told he was drinking wine. He was on his way to treat Becky Anderson in the hospital and got arrested on a DUI car accident, injuring 4 people, a family of 4. He was on his way to do his rounds with Becky. He wrote a letter to Becky's oncologist saying, "Sorry, I didn't make my rounds to see Becky. Got in a car accident." Well, he failed to say that he was caught under DUI also. So when I learned that my doctor had an alcohol problem, I was outraged. I went before the Medical Board of California and told them, here I am. You didn't protect me. And here, not just me, but many other people have been injured, and some of them are gone. They've died. So I'm here to tell you that supporting this bill, supporting this proposition, it could save lives. Why this profession? This is the only profession in America that is allowed to get all these breaks. My doctor had 2 chances of diversion, 3 DUIs, and guess what? He continued to practice medicine and lost his license 7 years after my surgery. It's been almost 12 years since my surgery, and today I still suffer from excruciating pain. I have knots of stitches poking out of me, coming out of me. I find it very hard to sit and stand at long periods. It's really, really amazing that this profession gets so many breaks. Like I said, my doctor had so many breaks at the bites of the apple. You know, a crane operator on a construction site, if they're caught under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they are terminated, not suspended. They're terminated from their jobs. They're not allowed to come back to any job site. The locals, a person working in an assisted living community with seniors, they're drug tested every week, and they're terminated. Why this profession? Why did they get the big break? They took a Hippocratic oath to first do no harm. If doctors are drug tested, it could save patients' lives. My doctor was at his all-time high with his alcoholism during my surgery. During the time of my surgery and the surgeries of other people. I really believe that this proposition will save lives. That's what these doctors are supposed to do. They're supposed to save lives, not kill us or hurt us or injure us or butcher us. They're supposed to save us. Well, if it takes Proposition 46 to pass, to mandate that doctors be drug tested, then so be it. There's no other profession in America that gets away with murder other than this profession, and they should be drug tested. They have our lives in their hands. We go to them for help, to be cured, to be treated, to save our lives. Please say yes on Proposition 46. I urge you to please protect patients.
Thank you, Tina. And now I want to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Nordella, who is a family medicine specialist, an emergency medicine specialist, and has been a patient safety advocate for decades. He has stood up on behalf of his patients against the biggest insurance companies in the state, so we applaud him for that and appreciate his coming here to talk to us about Proposition 46. Let me just reiterate the three provisions of the measure, since I didn't do that earlier. As we said, Prop 46 requires random drug and alcohol testing for physicians to help prevent harm and save lives. It requires doctors to check the statewide prescription drug database called CURES that's already existing for when they describe narcotics, Schedule 2 or 3 drugs to a first-time patient to prevent prescription drug abuse. And it would index for inflation the state's cap on damages in medical negligence cases that was set at $250,000 in 1975 and has never in 38 years been indexed for inflation to ensure that patients who are harmed, like Tina, have access to the courts. Dr. Nordella?
Thank you very much for having me. Just like to do a few things and touch on all of the bases that were just mentioned. I'm a primary care physician. I've trained and went to school at UCLA, and I'm definitely in favor of Prop 46 on all three bases. The first I will address is the computer data that we have access to. We've implemented it in our practice approximately 5 years ago. It is definitely a good thing. It is not invasive to the patients. There's people out there, unfortunately, that do abuse medications, either for their own personal use or they create a stockpile to sell. This allows us information to see who has been doctor shopping. It's very quick, very easy, it's very secure, and it has to, the healthcare provider needs to be trained in order to access it. We've used it numerous times and probably used it last week, and in a very positive way. So very easy, very simple, and to have all physicians that are writing controlled substances would be a very positive and a very safe thing for the general population of patients. The second issue I want to talk about is the mandatory drug screening. The mandatory drug screening is definitely a very, very small inconvenience to physicians to perform and will give so much payback. Unfortunately, physicians, as you have heard, are not immune from normal abuse issues, whether it be alcohol or drugs, and they have access to them all. To implement a program like this, just basically makes sense. It could be performed very easily. We are mandated for our licenses to do continuing medical education. And every 2 years we have to be caught up, but if we have to be caught up in order for our knowledge base and then not to apply something as drug testing, and if we're altered during the times of making the decision, it really doesn't make any sense. So I think that's a big point. Physicians, one thing we can all count on is we're all in the population, and the population will become patients sooner or later. Even physicians become patients, or physicians' families. Physicians would not go to other physicians if they knew they were drug impaired, and unfortunately, the policing of our own has been really, in my opinion, unsuccessful. So I think that this, again, is a safety measure and definitely will help. I do want to address the third point to Proposition 46, which is the MICRA issue. As mentioned, it was installed in 1975 at a $250,000 cap. It has not been raised in the 38 years. I had a patient, unfortunately, going for an elective procedure, and through the process of anesthesia, had to be awakened, was not quite there. Patient, unfortunately, was extubated, vomited, aspirated, became hypoxic, coded, and this young person in their 20s was subject to neglect, malpractice. They had won, but remember the patient's family always coming in and saying, I have this 22-year-old male that I have to take care of for years to come. And looking at the money they received from that was certainly not enough to put them back into this healthcare system that she trusted in so much. So that's a very important point. Doing the research for this, coming down and talking, it was very interesting, and you won't hear this from the opposition. First of all, it is guided by the insurance industry. The insurance industry factually has put $60 million to defeat this issue. That tells me a few things. One is that it's a filthy rich industry, and it tells me also they're willing to spend a lot of money because they know it's going to hurt them as far as their profits go. In regards to that, thank God there's Prop 103. Most physicians are being fed information by our medical societies, mainly the CMA, that their rates will go through the roof. They will not be able to afford to practice medicine, and the scare tactic is out there. I just want to go on record as, in my opinion, thinking that is, and stating that is wrong. We do have Prop 103, which will actually, thank heavens we have Prop 103, is so the insurance industry cannot raise the premium to the physicians, but yet will suffer profit loss, which they clearly don't want to do, in the tune of $60 million. All in all, I think Prop 103 on all three facets are good for people and the patients, and that's what it's about. It's not about the physicians. It's not about the system. It's good for patients, and I encourage everyone to, the Consumer Watchdog has brought this proposition to us, is that we have to take it home now and get out and vote, and a vote of yes on 46 is what I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nordella. Yes. Tina, actually, one more item, and thank you, Dr. Nordella. I'll just elaborate briefly on what he said about malpractice insurance companies in California. Voters in 1988 regulated medical malpractice insurance premiums in California. They had not been tempered. In fact, they had gone up 450% after the cap was enacted in California, but rate regulation slowed down rate increases and has held them down for decades, since 1988, since the voters passed that. And Prop 103 gives the insurance commissioner the power to reject excessive rate increases from the malpractice insurance companies. Still, they're spending tens of millions to try and protect their profits with Prop 46. I wanted to ask Tina Minasian to give us just one additional example of another doctor with a continued substance abuse problem in California who ended up harming his patients, to really drive home the fact that Proposition 46 and this on-call ad highlighting the fact that doctors do drink and then harm their patients is really the truth, not make-believe. This is a serious problem in California that must be addressed. Tina, could you speak a little bit about Dr. Jan Adams, who just lost his license on Friday from Beverly Hills?
Sure. So it was back in 2008, I got a call from Kanye West's family, Yolanda Anderson, to see if I would support the Dr. Donda West law. When I looked into the law, I have to tell you, it's basically a no-brainer. It basically states that before you have any type of elective surgery, cosmetic surgery, you have to have a physical done. Had Dr. Donda West had a physical done, she wouldn't have had the surgery because she had a history of hypertension. Well, if that law was in place then, it would have been me too. I have high blood pressure, and I wasn't a candidate for the surgery period, let alone having high blood pressure. So the law passed, but here's the clincher. Here's the most outrageous part of it all, is that Dr. Donda West's doctor, Dr. Jan Adams, was a drunk. Multiple DUIs, multiple malpractice cases, and I have no doubt in my mind that he was in the same program as my doctor, Dr. Brian West, diversion. The medical board was running the diversion program during the time he had those DUIs. So I have to say that the Dr. Donda West bill, that has, I'm sure, has saved lives because folks have to have physicals done before they have elective surgery. But Dr. Jan Adams is another prime example of doctors who get away with substance abuse and are still allowed to practice. He continued to practice medicine even after her death. And I don't know if the family knew that he had an alcohol problem, a history of alcohol problem. But I have to tell you, that should have never happened. She should have never died. And I should have never gotten hurt. Dr. Jan Adams and Dr. Brian West are these are like a sample of other doctors that are out there. Carmen had mentioned earlier, 2,600 doctors have a substance abuse problem in California. Well, how many patients do a doctor see? 20 patients a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks in a year? That's thousands and thousands of patients who are at harm, who are in jeopardy of being injured or hurt by a doctor. So again, I'm calling out to the Californians to support Proposition 46 and mandate that doctors be drug tested, just like any other profession.
Thank you, Tina. Now we'll open it up for questions. First in the room. Does anyone have any questions? While they decide, I'm going to try and open up the phone line and hope there's not a fax on there. Hi, does anyone on the phone have a question? Going once? Questions on the phone? Okay, then. Go back to the room.
I have a quick question. The other side says that you're using this to exploit fears. Is this really a problem?
I don't think it's irrational to think that California patients should be concerned about the possibility that doctors in California are hanging out at the bar, as this ad depicts, and then being called back into the ER. And what Prop 46 does is highlight what, as we've said, is a serious patient safety crisis in California. It's not raising unnecessary fears when the fears are grounded. And I believe, as Tina certainly does, that every Californian should be concerned that no one in the state has the power to require a doctor to take a drug test. The California Medical Board cannot do that, even if they have good reason to suspect that doctor is abusing substances. We know from testimony in scientific journals. We know from testimony in scientific journals and from countless doctors that we've spoken to that physicians frequently do not turn in colleagues, either because They want to protect their reputations because they don't want to ruin their livelihoods, because they don't want to turn in a friend. But that means that California patients remain at risk by giving the medical board, the power to require drug tests, and by requiring those drug tests to be random. So even doctors who a colleague refuses to turn in get tested, California patients will be protected. That raising these issues isn't fear-mongering. It's just giving the public the information they need to vote to change it. Do you want to answer that, Tina?
Well, I just wanted to comment on it. If it was your mother, father, brother, sister, daughter, or son, and they were going to go under the knife, wouldn't you want to know if your doctor has a substance abuse problem? No, we as consumers, we look everything up. When it comes to buying a car, a refrigerator, a stereo, we look it up to see the best ones out there. But when it comes to doctors, people just take it for granted that our doctors are, they're going to save our lives. And I just find that astounding that question came out. I had another thought. I just lost it. I'm sorry.
You can think of it, and if you remember it before we're done, we can answer it.
A question for Dr. Nordella. Why aren't there more doctors speaking out about this?
Oh, I remembered. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Let me write it down.
Don't know, but I think you can speculate that it has to do with maybe the physicians don't want to, it could be a pattern of referrals they're getting from other doctors, and that this doctor sends them business. It could be the fact that, they just want it to go away. And usually by nature, doctors really aren't confronters. That's why, in my opinion, the insurance industry is kind of doing what they're doing. It's a group of people they kind of abuse. So, again, it's just speculation, but that would be my guess.
Thank you. And if there are any other questions, I think Tina had one more response. So go ahead with that.
So I find out several years later that my doctor was actually fired by a prominent plastic surgery center in Sacramento. I went in to meet with the head doctor and asked him, I'm hearing rumors that you fired Dr. Brian West. Did you fire Dr. Brian West? And he said, I can't say that, but I can say he didn't fit in. And it turns out, from talking to the medical staff there, I find out he was intoxicated twice while operating on 2 patients, and that's why he was fired. But here's the thing. That surgery center never reported it to the Medical Board of California, let alone his patients. And by the way, Miss Becky Anderson, the one with the no consent surgery, who's gone now, he was one of her patients at that plastic surgery center.
Do you know more about the diversion program that's still around?
No, diversion program's been abolished. It's defunct now. But the problem with that program is it was audited 5 times in 20 years. And all 5 audits, they failed. The medical board failed patients. They failed me. I wouldn't have been hurt had that diversion program not been in place. The medical board and the CMA and doctor groups were saying that, there's no patient that's ever been injured by a doctor in diversion. Well, how would you know that? How would patients know that? Diversion is a confidential monitoring program for doctors. So if you were to go on the website for the medical board, you wouldn't know your doctor's a drunk or an addict because diversion is secret. They don't post that on their website. So how do patients know? How do they know? That's why we need to support Proposition 46, because if they're randomly tested and they test positive, they're pulled from practice. And again, like Carmen says, they get taken care of. But at least they're not hurting other patients. The risk to patients is too high. And you get people like me. I'm alive to tell my story. I'm still here 12 years later telling my story. Others are not. They're gone. They're dead. Or they're sick. But I can tell the story. And doctors should not be able to get away with this. No other profession allows this. We should hold them to a higher standard. Not a lower one, a higher one.
Let me just add to that and close up. As Tina said, the diversion program was eliminated for many, many reasons. One of them was the problem with confidentiality and the fact that if a doctor entered diversion, they never had to enter an enforcement program. They were never punished for their problem or the harm that they may have caused. in California now, we have no solution. We have no answer to doctors with a substance abuse problem, in part because that diversion program was eliminated and nothing replaced it. And year after year, efforts to address the question of physician substance abuse run into a brick wall because the medical community refuses to allow enforcement to happen in conjunction with physician treatment. And it's absolutely necessary that a doctor have to notify the medical board if they have a substance abuse problem, and that information not be kept private. And so this is the wall that reform of physician substance abuse has run into in the legislature for years and years. With that, I will just say one last thing, that Proposition 46 models its physician drug testing after tried and true practices by the Federal Aviation Administration, pilots, bus drivers, truck drivers. Most safety-sensitive positions in America require doctors or require their employees to be drug tested. Doctors are no better, and doctors hold positions that are just as safety-sensitive. It only makes sense that a profession that holds our life in their hands, like doctors, undergo random drug testing. With that, we will let you go. Thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions to follow up, you can call me at 310-526-0746, 310-526-0746. Thanks, everyone.